all of these things are ways that your brand is developing through its life cycle. And it's hard to kind of say like it's this or that, but it's definitely more than just your logo on a yard sign.
Designed to encourage, empower, and educate real estate professionals by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and this is Calibrate Real Estate. Broadcasting from the Mile High City, thank you for tuning in to the Calibrate Real Estate podcast. We're on Apple iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. We'd love a 5-star review. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati. Jessica Swesey is our guest today from 1000 Watt in the Bay Area. Say hi, Jessica.
Hello.
Jessica was referred to us by our last guest, Vanessa Bergmark. She was on episode 66, Vanessa was, and Jessica came as a very high recommendation because Jessica's done work at 1000 Watt for Red Oak Realty and for Vanessa. Let's talk about what 1000 Watt is like, what your company does to help real estate brokerages and people in the real estate industry rebrand, launch new objectives through branding, and just talk about 1000 Watt and how that evolved, both how you got there, but then also what you do for your clientele today.
Great. Thank you. So excited to be here.
We're excited to have you.
So 1000 Watt's a creative agency for real estate. So we only work in this vertical. We do a lot of brand work. So we do visual design and also a lot of messaging work, which involves a lot of words and strategy. So we work with companies like Red Oak, and we work with a lot of other types of companies in the space too. A lot of tech companies that are, selling products and platforms to real estate companies. We've worked with MLSs before. We work with mortgage companies as well, title companies. And the common thread is, we really marry our decades of real estate domain expertise that the Fort partners have gained over many years working around the real estate business. And we marry that with our creative acumen. And we come up with, strategic and creative ways of bringing brands to the forefront or pushing new messages or positioning out into the world.
So branding is such a hot topic because I think everybody's got their own perspective on how to do it. I've got to park on something you said about words. Okay. So I just went through a sort of a brand exercise with one of my career coaches, and it was a really interesting experience where I was kind of meandering around with my mission statement for years, actually. And I kind of knew all the different words I wanted to use. And I often find that the more truncated, the smaller amount of words that you use for something like a mission statement or for brand copy, the harder it is to communicate. It's often harder to communicate in succinct sentences. And so for those that don't know it, the mission statement at Calibrate Real Estate is we exist to help people create generational wealth through real estate. That's our mission. We typically do that by selling apartment buildings, investment properties, et cetera, but that's 11 words. The evolution is that it was something like 20 or 25 words before that. And it's really evolved a lot. And I've just got to imagine, as someone that has had a lot of experience in writing, and you had shared with me prior to our recording here that you actually worked at Inman for quite a while and you come from journalism, that's got to just be something that's a real advantage for you at 1000 Watt, that you can help people take, what would be hundreds of words and condense it down so it's very clear. Because I feel like the people who win in any industry are able to communicate the clearest and the most succinct.
That's true. It is much harder to write 100-word email, than it is to write 1,000-word email and be able to get the same message across. But in the same way, it's also 1,000 times more effective to have the shorter version because, the human mind can only really process so much. And in marketing, especially, there's sort of like this rule of one, you need to kind of speak to one person. You need to have one idea that you're getting across in every piece. And that all kind of plays off that same, what you're saying about clarity and just being very clear in what it is you're getting across. So yeah, you know, in our process, we often will start, you know, when we're trying to come up with positioning for a company or really, you know, twist it into a new direction. We will start with a statement that is a giant word salad, and we will spend hours, you know, shaving words out, completely blowing it up sometimes, you know, and get down to what I always like to think of as like the 10 most important words. And every company really needs to have like 10 words that they can use that really serve as, you know, you could call it a tagline, you could just call it a headline, you could call it your positioning statement, whatever you want to call it. It's kind of your guiding light in why you do what you do, and helps you kind of level set when you're doing any sort of brand exercise or marketing campaign. You know, even when you hire people, like you could look to those 10 words and think, does this person fit with that? You know, does this person understand that? Can they get on board with that? So yeah, you're right. Clarity is key. And I think, you know, working all those hours that I did earlier in my career and writing, you know, thousands of stories over the years for real estate, I think has helped me to be able to weed out words that I know are pretty much meaningless or have been overused or just aren't going to move the needle the way they need to.
And before we talk about Inman, let's just finalize this thought about clarity. One of the best descriptions I've ever heard of clarifying things or condensing them down or removing words is thinking of things like a sculptor would. You know, a sculptor will approach a piece of marble or something larger, a piece of wood, and they're constantly shaving that down. They're actually reducing to create their piece of art. They're not adding to it. Where a lot of artists look at it, if you take a painting and a blank canvas, you're adding things constantly to it. And what do I add next? What do I add next? And I like to think about that because it helps me simplify things. It's like, you know, you're doing everything you can to make this perfect by taking away from the original piece. So I think that's really, really got to be difficult. And for someone like yourself that has written stories for literally thousands of different stories with Inman, that's something that you've perfected. So let's talk about that time with Inman. You mentioned to me as we were just getting started that Brad Inman's been very influential in your career and several of the partners at 1000 Watt. So what was it like to work at Inman? I think that's a company that most people in the real estate industry know about. And what are some of the things you did there, and what are some memorable experiences working at Inman before you started at 1000 Watt?
Okay. Yeah, Inman was fun. I was only 23 years old when I first started at Inman. And it was a very different company back then. Like the events were smaller, but just as influential as they are now. And it was really exciting. Like I always kind of felt like I was part of the in crowd. You know, I think that was even one of the things that we marketed around at the time. You know, being kind of at the forefront, and being so young too, like it was always exciting to me knowing like, well, first of all, I went to work at 7 a.m. every day, you know, as a 23-year-old, and I actually looked forward to it. My friends all thought I was nuts. But I would, you know, go to work and open my inbox, you know, turn on my computer, and like, I never knew where the day was going to take me. I mean, sometimes I did, but things would just like pop up sometimes, you know, breaking news happens. You have to drop everything and go and like interview the CEO at a company that just came out with some major announcement unexpectedly. So there was a lot of adrenaline, you know, adrenaline packed moments, really serious deadlines. Like we were a real news service. Like there was pressure to get stuff done, you know, in an hour sometimes, you know, like this has to be done. Talk about, you know, the pressure of like trying to be brief and also, you know, get the story across, right? But it really, you know, it taught me a lot about, first of all, the real estate industry, you know, getting that view of being a reporter and kind of seeing all different angles. My beat was really technology. So I sat in on literally hundreds and hundreds of demos of technology. A lot of it's not even around anymore. I got to be, I think I was one of the first people in the country to see Zillow before it launched. Was in a room with Rich Barton and Amy Bohutinsky and Brad Inman, I remember, and seeing it for the first time. So that was exciting. And also really getting an understanding of the market. So when I worked there, I hadn't even bought my first house yet. So really just like reading a lot. I edited tons of columns every week by national real estate columnists who were writing about mortgages and, different things in real estate law, capital gains taxes, and like all sorts of like actually useful knowledge was kind of going into my brain through the process of this. And also kind of understanding at more of a macro level, like the importance of housing in the overall economy, and being able to get on the phone with economists and have them talk to me about that was really just priceless, priceless education on housing. And I think in the process of all of that, I gained a real just, dedication and to this industry and understanding how important it truly is. And I still believe that, housing is incredibly important, not only to the economy, but just to our general sense of being Americans and our well-being. But also, I got this sort of empathy was built up in me over the years too, for the people who work in this industry. I've never sold real estate. I've never, been in a position at a brokerage even, but I really get like the importance of what you all do on a daily basis. And, that's part of the mission at 1000 Watt really is to elevate the way real estate presents itself in the world because it's so important. We all believe that here. So yeah, like it all kind of started at Inman, we all worked there. Our CEO and one of our founders, Brian Boero, he was president of Inman for a long time. And a lot of great relationships were built over those years that we still have today.
Well, I think that's cool. And I'd love to know how it evolved then to going and creating this business, 1000 Watt, and what your daily or weekly experience might look like now working with brands. And if someone called you up or someone set up a consult, what are the types of things that you typically help companies with on a daily basis?
So, if someone were to call us up for a consult, we generally will kind of engage with them in a few conversations till we figure out exactly it is what they need and whether or not they're a good fit for us and that we're a good fit for them. We don't like to take on clients that we feel we can't help in the end. So we try to suss that out, before we even like get into a relationship. But typically once we do sign on a new client, we spend a lot of time in what we call discovery. And that is basically our method for really like peeling back the layers and understanding like what is really happening at this company. What is this brand trying to be? What is it, at its heart? And so we have a number of things that we do. We'll do a lot of like customer interviews. We'll go on site if it's a brokerage company, we will go on site and then we'll actually like tour their city a little bit if it's a city that we are not familiar with, to get a feel for the people there, the colors, the sort of visual influences, we use all of that if we're doing identity work. We think about all of that, and we use it for inspiration. But we spend a couple of days with each client in person, and we put them through, different exercises, lots of questioning, of course, and, kind of some fun exercises too, to get them thinking about their brand in a new way. I think a lot of times people, especially if like you're a founder of the company or you've been with the company for like many, many years, you kind of, at some point you and the company are one, and you kind of forget that like, well, the brand is like a separate thing. So we do exercises that try to help people understand their influence on the brand, but that the brand is its own thing too. And our clients often will come out of these exercises seeing the brand in a different way themselves, which is always really fun to witness. So we come out of those, early weeks with just armed with a lot of information. And then we hit the ground running, and we take that information and we formulate a strategy. And, that strategy kind of depends on what type of engagement it is. If it's, purely marketing and messaging, that's going to look a lot different than, designing a rebrand. So we have a full creative team that is based in Portland. Most of our company is in Portland. We have a satellite office here in Oakland where I am. And it's a very collaborative experience among our designers and strategists in how we, sort of excavate all of this information that we got in discovery and put it together in a meaningful strategy that is also something they can own going forward, because we always try to create or come out with work that comes from a point of truth. So we're not like building brands out of thin air, they actually are stemming from something that we found.
So what I'm hearing there is that you're almost polishing the brand and really bringing light to what's already there. But because a founder or a partner or some senior executive may have been there for such a long time, and I know that I'm this way just in a few years of starting Calibrate Real Estate in 2016, the old adage is it's very difficult to read the label of the bottle when you're inside the bottle. It's very difficult to see what's apparent to everybody else on the outside. And so you're not creating the brand. You're not creating the brand strategy. I mean, you're really just accentuating what's already there and helping them see it from your outside perspective, which I think is really brilliant.
It's true. Yeah. Because a lot of times too, like when, you're in the bottle, like you're saying, you think that something that you have is really special, and you may take for granted something else as like, oh, that's just always been there. That's table stakes, whatever. But we often will come in and say, you have it backwards. Like what you think is really special, like every broker in the country is doing that. And like what we're finding from agents is like, they don't really care. But what your agents told us, because we'll do sessions, like if it's a brokerage, we'll do sessions with agents too, just agents. What your agents told us is like, they love the fact that you're 150 years old, and they love the old stories that you tell. And they love the fact that like the founder was here when, this town was established or whatever, and we will sometimes turn it around, sort of rearrange the deck a little bit and show the people at the brand where the real powerful story is. It's always there. It's just a matter of like the strategy. And, a lot of that has to do with what's happening out in the marketplace too, right? Like if all of your competitors are telling stories of family heritage, then, we're not going to build your brand on family heritage. We're going to help you find the other thing that's special.
I think that's really smart. Obviously, you would say, hey, here's what all of your other competitors are doing. Let's try to differentiate yourself.
Hmm.
And I think the topic of competitors is a worthwhile discussion, because I would imagine that you've gotten so good. You've probably worked in certain markets with certain people. And do you ever kind of max out of a market, for lack of a better term, or say like, hey, I don't know, you're kind of tested out of that market because we've worked with 2 or 3 different folks and we don't want to create a conflict of interest? Does that ever happen?
Yes, that has happened before.
Okay. I figured it
um,
might.
yeah, we won't work with like direct competitors, unless if they don't care. In some markets, it's not a big deal. The broker may be targeting a different niche within, the region or whatever, and not really be worried about the other one. But in most cases, because we are in a vertical, like we will keep that in mind. Like we don't want to, work with a company that's trying to crush company B and then, you know, at the same time sign a contract with company B and start working with them. And just like, it's kind of like a lawyer working both sides of the deal.
Sure. Well, I think that's important for people to know that, and that's all part of your initial consultation, where you had said right from the beginning that a lot of the discussion is to figure out, are we a good fit to work together in the first place? So Jessica, I think I think it's very clear that your group is extremely thorough with and very thoughtful about how they approach any brand. And none of it is, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. It's all, we've taken all this information, and because we've done all this research and all this thoughtful exercise, we believe that this is the best situation for you. And I'm assuming that the client still opts into that. It's not like you're, saying you have to do it this way. So I think you're going to end up getting a lot of feedback from your clients that says, yeah, absolutely, because you've done all this exhaustive research, I believe you. And yes, I think that's the way we should go. Next thought that I have there too is just, there's got to be some common stuff you run into. You mentioned just that there's groups that think like, this is our strategy and this is always the way we communicate. And you're like, actually, there's a lot of people doing that, but we're seeing that this is really interesting. And I hate to call it mistakes, but are there some common just things that you see from consulting with companies all across the nation that you're like, man, most people kind of get their brand wrong this way, or we see a lot of this and that's kind of misguided? Are there any things like that are just common themes you're seeing in real estate brokerage lately?
Yeah, I mean, in brokerage in particular, what tends to happen is, a new company comes to town and, one broker will hear, well, they're doing this, they're offering, I don't know, in-house marketing studio, for example. I'm just pulling that up out of thin air. And then that, the next broker says, okay, we need to build one of those. Ours needs to be better. We're going to market around, and basically kind of stealing things or copying. Like there's a lot of that happens. A lot of, and that's totally normal. I think as humans, it's sort of the group mentality. Like, a new company comes into town and they're throwing wild parties and stuff. And you're like, oh my God, we need to start throwing wild parties, and it's like, brand is actually the complete opposite of that, or at least our approach is, the way you're really going to stand out is by standing out and being yourself and really figuring out what that is, because that's the only thing on this earth that you can truly own. You can't, and sure, others can try to copy it, but it's going to come off the same way that you came off when you tried to copy them. It's going to be inauthentic. People will, chuckle, and everybody will know, like, that's not them, that's you. So, that's really kind of fundamentally at the heart of like how we approach everything, is really just kind of like, let's build a real brand, which comes from the inside, not from the outside.
And I think that's important to really dive deep on that, because I think there is a lot of confusion about what a brand even is. And so talking about what's on the inside versus maybe what's on the outside, I think it's more than just logos, more than just design, more than just website copy. You're really starting to figure out who it is, who's the culture of the business, how the business might react together in crisis mode or when things are going positively. And so what is your perspective on just what that word brand is? Because I think there is a lot of confusion around it and what it actually means, or what people need to discover when they're really researching and trying to understand what their brand is in the marketplace. Because I think we all have this perception, and then all of a sudden you may hear some feedback from some people who should know who your brand is, people who've worked with you, and they say something totally different, which is very interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to really pinpoint like brand is this or brand is that, because it's really like the culmination of a lot of things. And a lot of it's frankly out of your control, right? Like I was just thinking about this before we got on this podcast today. Like you think about the difference in like other major brands like in your life. And I was thinking about Uber versus Lyft, like for me. And I prefer Lyft. And I made a decision years ago that I would only use Lyft because I really gravitated to that brand. But a lot of it had to do with just my perception, right? Like I kind of knew the inside story of like bad things that were happening at Uber, and just like, I liked their counter to that and the way they kind of built their brand as a very like softer, friendlier, play on the ride sharing. And so like some of that definitely was deliberate on their part. If you remember, like they're pink, and there's a reason that their brand is pink. They came out after Uber, which was very sort of male skewed in its identity and the way it spoke and the way it presented itself. And so Lyft deliberately came out as the softer, more female friendly, maybe even safer option for women. So some of that was deliberate, but like, again, some of that was my perception of the brand that I took, just from like different interactions that I had. So, in defining brand, this is why we kind of take a deep dive and really try to set a strategy, or what we call a foundation, because your brand can't be built in a day, and it can't be built just in the course of an engagement with 1000 Watt even. We can build the foundation and help you understand like how to chart the course forward. But it's like you have to keep this cadence and keep coming back to that strategy every time you make major and minor decisions, really, like in how you answer the phone at your company. Like that's part of your brand experience. What your lobby looks like, what people see when they walk in the front door, how your agents are every day. Like all of these things are ways that your brand is developing through its life cycle. And it's hard to kind of say like it's this or that, but it's definitely more than just your logo on a yard sign. It's your logo on a yard sign. It's the expectation that you would have of working with, an agent at your company. It's, again, like the little touches and how you answer the phone and all of that stuff. It's what you would say in an ad versus not say. So, it's more. It's hard to.
It's okay, because what I'm hearing, if I'm attuned to this and if I'm picking it up, is I'm hearing that brand is all about perception and then experience, because perception can be outside. You might hear about it from a neighbor or someone that worked with that brand, and then it's your experience. So you talked about Lyft and Uber, and it could be Coke and Pepsi or whatever, McDonald's, Burger King, McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, whatever you want to compare, test A and B. But it is that initial perception. And then of course, does the perception meet the experience, that reality? And the old adage is perception is reality. And so I think that's very important. And you do mine for that, it seems like, and I can just sense that that's a lot of the exercise that you go through. And so I might turn this interview around a little bit, because I think that this is going to be very similar to what you do on a daily basis. And I think one of my favorite questions, and this is a different slant on this question, that a lot of people get bent out of shape when they may make mistakes and they think that they're a failure when maybe their plan doesn't go perfectly. And I will tell you from being a business owner that there's a lot of pride in what you've created as a business owner. And you put a lot of hard work, a lot of sweat, tears, blood, banging your knuckles on, moving a desk from one room to the other. There's just a lot that goes into being an entrepreneur and starting a business. So I know that successful people deal with failure differently. So I'm going to put myself on the spot. I've never been shy to do this. And so if you were working with me, and we have not worked together, just full disclosure, so people don't feel like this is a loaded thing. So if Jessica, if you're working with me and you're just trying to get to know me, what are some questions you ask me to start to mine for what some of the perceptions of my brand are, having probably no idea what Calibrate Real Estate's all about here in Denver? What are some things that you would ask me to start uncovering my brand that people might be able to think about as they're trying to maybe reposition? And then of course we want them to get in touch with you, but what are some things you'd ask me?
I'd ask you why, you have to sort of figure out like what drives a company, other than making money, of course, because that's just, par for course. Every company has to make money, but
sure.
why?
That's a very necessary byproduct of what you do. And so if I can answer that, because I'd like the active role play there. I started Calibrate Real Estate for a bunch of reasons. I worked at several different boutique brokerage firms and I kind of saw all the different perceptions of them, some good, some bad. But in commercial real estate, I feel like the perception is that residential real estate agents are kind of a pariah to commercial real estate agents. They're annoying. I don't want to interact with you. And so we first off want that to be a friendly environment for residential agents to interact with commercial agents. Secondarily, commercial real estate is kind of the good old boy network. And there's a lot of like guardedness and closed off conversation. It tends to be very old fashioned. I prefer to be innovative and do things like a podcast and other things like that. And then further, it is all about the family experience that I tend to have. And it's not just about working with families. We work with some folks that are singles, but it is all about generational wealth. And that's why I had said that in our mission, that we exist to help people create generational wealth through real estate. That's what we're all about. And I think that a lot of commercial real estate agents are in it for them, in it for their commissions, in it for making their headlines more impressive. And so a lot of the interviews that I've done over the past 5 years have been celebrating my clients, people that have succeeded, and we get to be along for the ride for our clients. And so that's probably how I'd answer all of that. And then maybe what's a follow-up question that you would ask someone after you hear kind of why they're in business in the first place?
One of my favorite things to really try to figure out in the beginning of an engagement too is like, if there's one word that you could own, right? If your company could just claim ownership of only one word, what would that word be and why?
Ooh, I would hope, and it'll be interesting because I hope you test me here. I would hope it would be the word calibrate, which is why I chose that word for our company, because that's a word that means a lot to me. So that would be my word, but maybe I'm off, and it's good for me to hear this if I am off.
What do you think that word means to your target market?
It's a verb, first of all. And I like the fact that verbs give the connotation of action. A lot of real estate companies are named after nouns. And as far as my clients go, most of our clients buy a piece of real estate for investment purposes because they believe that they can improve upon the existing experience that's being had there. So whether a lot of the terminology in our business is adding value or value add proposition. And I believe that calibration is all about working towards an ideal succession. You're iterating constantly through course corrections, and you may take a piece of real estate and say it's mismanaged, fire the management company, hire a new management company, or these units need to be repaired, they're tired, these apartments need to be upgraded. And so I think that every one of my clients approaches their business model saying, I'm going to buy that piece of real estate and improve upon it in some way. And then I think it also is a personal attachment that every person who's successful has a growth mindset and a learning mindset. And I think that calibration of yourself is also very important to be able to achieve great wealth and wisdom and other things like that. So I think it has a double meaning, their business, but then also how they are personally in their growth journey.
Mm-hmm. That's a good answer. It's a great word too.
Thank you.
I have kind of a funny story about that word, actually. So I do a fair amount of business travel, and I have 2 young daughters at home. And so I, in the last couple of years, have started leaving them notes every time I go on a trip. And my younger daughter can't write or read yet, but my older daughter can. And she left me a note last time I got home, and what I thought it said was, "I can't wait to calibrate with you tomorrow." And I'm like, I don't know what she means by this, but it sounds awesome. Let's calibrate. I'm like, I'm like, it's something great, because she has this imaginative 9-year-old, mind. And she's, I'm asking her about it at breakfast the next day. I'm like, so what are we calibrating, Addie? And she's like, it's celebrate, Mom. It said celebrate.
Well, as a father of a 9-year-old, so I have a 9-year-old and twins that are 8 years old. So I have very similar experiences with you. And I got a note. I was just gone for the last week on a mission trip and got a very similar note from my daughter. And their handwriting starts to get a little bit better, but their spelling is a little bit more phonetic than it is literal. And so I actually understand that completely a little bit. I think that's so great. So I have to ask the question, because it was a big topic in my conversation with Vanessa Bergmark. So Jessica, being a partner of a business like 1000 Watt and
Mm-hmm.
also being a mom,
Mm-hmm.
what is that like? I mean, I hate to say how do you fit it all in, because I think that that's intentionally I think that's kind of the wrong question,
Mm-hmm.
but what do you do to be successful at work and at home? And what are some things that you're doing just personally that you feel like are good, growth mindset for you, that you can say, look, I can do both. I can be a rock star at home and I can be a rock star in the workforce.
That's a really good question. It's not an easy juggle, that's for sure. And I don't like when people try to pretend like it's not, because it's just not.
I agree.
Or pretend like it is, because it's not. I have found that I perform a lot better when I compartmentalize. And when I say, my workday ends at 5, it ends at 5. Maybe every once in a while there are some things I need to do at night, but it's very rare, because what I've found over the years is I need to know that I'm better when I'm fully present, and if I'm at home and I'm worried about something that's got to get done after the kids go to bed, then I'm not fully present, and I'm rushing them through things, and I'm not experiencing those moments that I need to be experiencing with them. And vice versa, if I'm at work and I'm worried about, taking care of my kids. I mean, it's why I have childcare. It's why my kids go to school, so that I can be fully present at work on the other end of it. And I actually, I think that some business travel is good for that, because then at least I get those times when I'm I'm fully at work, I like going on client discoveries, because my mind is there. I'm not worried about all the things that are happening at home. Cause I also have a great partner who handles everything beautifully when I'm gone. So I think too, one thing that having kids has really taught me, and I always tell people, becoming a parent is the greatest personal development class you can ever take. Cause I've learned more about myself in the last 9 years than I ever had before that. I have learned how to handle setbacks a lot easier, or just a lot better than I ever had without kids, because I think it's things they're never going to work out perfectly. They're never going to go as planned. And so it's all about how you kind of bounce back from that. or you handle the unexpected. Like, okay, I've got 4 major calls today and my kid is sick and my husband is out of town or whatever. And it's all on me. You know, I don't have any family in California. So we're kind of on our own childcare wise most of the time. So handling setbacks, I think, has helped me grow even more in both aspects, as being a mom and as, you know, being part of a business. So yeah, I mean, I think really it's just, like I said, it's like drawing clear boundaries and honoring those boundaries as much as possible too, because it's pretty easy to set boundaries and then just, you know, be sitting there doing email the whole time you're on vacation. And it's just not good. Like you have to, everybody deserves both, right? So it's all about following through on that.
Well, and I think that a lot of this ties into branding too, that I have found that when you're consistent with your boundaries, if you say, I have a checkout time at 5 o'clock, or I start work at 7 o'clock, you know, like you were saying when you were at Inman, people learn to expect that. And then if they send you an email on Saturday at 4, they're probably not going to hear back from you until Monday. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, they can send their email whenever they're thinking about something, but if you're consistent when you get back, or if you're on vacation, you're like, hey, I'm not checking email. And I think those are all good things. And this has been a fantastic discussion. We've hit the end of our time, and it's always, as I record any type of podcast, it is always very bittersweet as we end, because it's like I could talk for another 30 minutes about different things. But I think the point is that you're in this business of helping people in the real estate vertical in our industry. You've got that outsider's perspective. You've written thousands of articles throughout your career, and you're all about clarifying messages. How do people get in touch with you, or how do people interact with you so that they can maybe do some sort of consult or demo with figuring out, maybe exploring working with 1000 Watt and with Jessica Swesey? I
mean, I think the best place to start really is to just look at our work at 1000 Watt 1000watt.net. We have a lot of our work up there that you can look at. You know, brand and design work. And we have a blog that has been going for, you know, since the day this agency opened. And we still write pretty regularly. So you can sign up for our blog at our website as well. And that's a good way to really like kind of get to know how we think and how we approach the industry and kind of, you know, branding and marketing and strategy. And then, you know, from there, send us an email. And I'm at jessica@1000watt.net, and, you know, always happy to talk. I still love, you know, learning about new technologies that are out there, and just, you know, hearing about new business models and brokerages and everything. So even if it's not a fruitful relationship in terms of, you know, work, it's always great to just be exposed to people, new people.
Yeah. And I think that this was a common thing that was a theme throughout our interview that people need to hear on the flip side. If you're an agent out there looking for your next listing, or you're contemplating working with a client, it's not a foregone conclusion that you have to work with someone. And I think that was very appropriate. Where you're like, hey, we're going to always just have that exploration where we're going to figure out if this is going to make sense for us to work together. And I think on the flip side, you had said, take a look at our work, see the people we've worked for, or the type of things we've done, and see if we feel like we're a fit for you, because not everybody's going to need or want to work with 1000 Watt and vice versa. And so I think that's just a good message for anyone in business. That I say this constantly to clients that are, hey, I've seen you online and it seems like you really are a good fit for what I want to do. I'm like, well, let me send you a couple of pieces of work that I've done, and then let's talk about this and see if we're really a good fit for each other. And I think that's a very good theme for the end of our show. So Jessica Swesey, I really do appreciate it. Vanessa Bergmark, I really appreciate you for introducing us. And I would encourage you to check out their website. Look for 1000 Watt, that's 100 WATT, like light bulb, 1000watt.net, right? 1000watt.net. And as I love to say for all of my guests, Jessica Swesey, we appreciate you, and Kayla Davis and I really do appreciate you being on the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. And as I love to say, we will see you around the neighborhood. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.